Hello, everyone, and welcome to Africa Fire Mission's weekly virtual training session. My name is Mike, and I'm the programs director here at Africa Fire Mission. We're so happy that you took time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's virtual training. Today, we're going to be talking about pump operations and taking a look at an example of a fire pump that you might see. Talking a little bit about how we should be working with those hoses and the fire pumps, but before we get started with that, let me just touch on a couple of administrative notes for you. If you stick around for at least 70% of today's training, which is usually about 40 or 45 minutes, you can receive a certificate of attendance for today's training. If something happens, your network cuts out, maybe you get a fire call, you've got to leave. There's some other ways that you can earn that certificate of attendance as well. If you head on over to our webpage at www.africafire.mission.org, you can find a tab, a resources tab up on the top of the page or on the side of the page, depending on the device that you're using. Go to that resources tab and click on training materials. There you're going to find a wealth of free resources available to you that you can use, including a Google Drive, which has a recording of all of our trainings that we've done so far this year. If you watch the recording and answer a couple questions to let us know that you watched the whole video and learned and understood something, I'll get you a certificate of attendance for that class as well. So I encourage you to go there and check that out. A couple other notes. The screen name that you're using here on Zoom is the name that shows up on that certificate of attendance. So if you'd like to change that, please go ahead and take care of that. Get it set up however you'd like to see that appear on your certificate. If you're sharing your screen with other people, that's a great way to save some bundles and still get lots of training in. If you're sharing that screen with some other people, go ahead and drop me an email. I'll be putting my email address and some information in the chat in just a few moments. Let me know who else is watching on your screen, and I'll get you a certificate of attendance for them as well. So with that, let me get a few things set up, and we're gonna dive right into today's training as we talk a little bit about pumps and things like that. So let's get some screen sharing going on here. All right, pump operations. So um, the big thing that you want to remember when we're looking at pumps and thinking about how do these various pumps that we're looking at work. You know, a centrifugal fire pump is the most common type of pump. You're going to see it on almost every fire apparatus. And truly, if you can run one pump, you can run them all. I've been saying that for years as I've trained different people here in the U.S. how to run a fire pump, and the first time that I traveled to Africa to work with you guys, the first thing I was doing was pump operations, right? And it you take a look at that pump, you look things over, and I found it was pretty simple to run it myself. It's really true if you can run one fire pump right, you can run them all. So we're going to talk a little bit about this, some things that you need to think about, um, and how we're going to take care of our pump operations. First thing we want to touch on a little bit here is sort of what we're going to call checking the appliance, checking the apparatus. A couple things that you should do probably before your shift. You certainly to be prepared and make sure that everything's functional and you're ready to go for your training. That first thing, the water tank, right? We should be keeping that water tank full all the time. I think that kind of goes without saying. Um, that we've always got to make sure we've got a full water pump, or excuse me, water tank. Uh, and you've got to check and make sure that it's full. Sometimes the gauges that we've got on our apparatus aren't working, right? So sometimes you've got an electronic tank level gauge on the rear at the pump. Uh, Sometimes you've got a sight glass that'll let you to get an idea of what the tank level is. We've got to know if those are functioning, and we've got to know whether we should trust those or not. So don't just trust that the gauge. Be sure that you're climbing up on the top of the truck, uh, popping the hatch or the door or whatever you have there up on the top, and take a look down inside the tank. Making sure there's water in there. Try to gauge what that level is. Try to determine what that water level is inside the pump or inside the tank there. Compare that to the gauge if you've got a gauge that's working. If it's not working, you've got to pass that information on. Be sure you know that that gauge isn't reliable. Uh, Really important to make sure we're always operating with a full water tank for a couple of reasons. Obviously, there's that public trust thing. I know that we struggle sometimes with that. We get accused of arriving on the scene without water, and when our tank was full, right? The people don't understand that. Um, you know, a lot of the trucks we're operating have a small water tank capacity. It goes very quickly, so they think, well, they showed up without water. So certainly we want to make sure we've got the tank full for that public trust portion of it. There's also sort of safety reasons why you should keep that water tank full when you're driving around. Um, Hopefully, most of our water tanks and our trucks have baffles in them, but some don't. And what a baffle is, there are some dividers within the water tank that keep that water from moving around so much uh, inside the tank. So as you're going down the road, every time you brake, every time you slow down the appliance, the fire engine, right, that water is going to try in the tank is going to try to continue moving, right? The momentum of the truck moving, that water is carrying that momentum. So it's going to be pushing forward on you uh, as you brake. When you accelerate the truck, that water is going to try to stay at the speed it was going or staying still if you as you pull away. So that water is going to move backwards towards the rear of the truck. Every time you go around a curve, as you turn to the left or you turn to the right, that water wants to stay on that same track that you've been going. So that water is constantly, moving within that water tank and exerting those forces on the truck. So as the operator, you have to understand that. In these water tanks, when they put baffles or some dividers in, that sort of slows the flow of that water movement within the tank, to try to help prevent that change of weight distribution from throwing you around and causing you to lose control of the truck. Some of our water tanks don't have those, so if you've got that water tank completely full, there's not a lot of room inside there for the water to move around. So it's really not gonna to shift the weight of the truck and potentially cause a rollover or something like that. But if there's no baffles in that tank, there's no dividers within that water tank, and it's only half full. There's plenty of room for that water to move around, and water's heavy, right? So it's constantly sloshing around in there and can really throw off the center of balance of your truck and can make things a little bit dangerous when you're driving. So we want to make sure that we've got that water tank completely full when we're driving around. To try to keep better control of the truck. So keep the water tank full. Don't trust your gauges. Um, get up there, take a peek inside. At the same time, slightly off topic, but when you're out in your community doing some of that community sensitization work, it's another good thing to invite the when you bring the fire truck out to your sensitization event. If somebody says, hey, you guys always show up with no water, invite them up to the top of the truck, pop that hatch open, and let them see. Look, there's water in the truck. So just something to think about there. Next, what we want to do is we want to check the pump, right? So whatever process that may be, and we'll talk about that process. But before your shift starts, or as you're coming on shift, uh, make sure that pump operates and be sure that it builds pressure. So engage your pump, open up that pump to tank valve. If you have a tank fill valve, go ahead and open that up. Increase your throttle up to around 4 bar or so, and check to make sure that you're building up pressure. Um, Listen to make sure that when you're increasing the throttle, the engine RPMs are rising. Um, if your pressure gauges are working, check to see that you're getting that increase in pressure. Make sure that's working, right? So testing your pump, running that pump on a daily basis. Um, you don't have to hook up your hose and discharge any water out of the tank to test that. Um, you can always hook a hose to one of your discharges and bring it around into one of your intakes if you don't have that tank fill valve on there. Some trucks do, some don't. Uh, so essentially, you're taking the water from the water tank into your pump and then pumping it back around through the intake valve and back in. So you can see that the pump's operating. You can feel that water flowing through the delivery hose, right? But we know that it works, and we're not losing any water. We're not discharging that water out on the ground. Uh, Another sort of important thing that we want to understand is how the water flows through our pump and through the plumbing, through the pipes that are set up on our apparatus, where each valve is and what it does. So what we're looking at here is a diagram um, of the pump, and this image is taken from a fire truck that we've worked with in Africa. So it's something that you'll probably see. Typically, this diagram is found inside wherever your pump compartment is, usually that back rear compartment of the truck somewhere on the inside wall. And uh, it's got an explanation. It's numbering each one of the valves, telling you what the valve is. Sometimes it's telling you the size of the valve. So this is how we know every fire pump sort of works the same. We have that idea in our head. We understand how to run our pump, but we haven't seen that particular one before. Maybe you get a new to you fire truck, and well, I've never run this pump before. I don't know how it works. Well, taking those basic principles that you already know, and this diagram here, this is going to tell us how everything works, right? So you've got if you're looking at this particular diagram at the top of it, it's showing your water tank there. This was a 12,000 liter pumper. Here it shows you where it sort of comes out. It's got your valves labeled. Number 7 there's your return valve to the pump. Okay, and you just trace those lines through to the different valves and uh, get in there and look at the pump. Right, look at the pump. When we're looking at our fire pump and you see that big impeller housing, the center portion of the pump. Generally speaking, all of our discharges are going to be above the center point of the impeller housing. Intakes will come in below the center point of that impeller housing. So just looking at the pump, looking at the diagram, you can figure out what each particular valve does and what each piece of plumbing does, right? So take a look at those. Start to educate yourself about that pump, trace things through, find out where they're at. Another thing to think about, uh, another plate that you might see within that pump panel there is a capacity plate, right? Lots of great information on these plates. Um, you want to know what your pump capacity is at a given pressure. So, how much water can we flow? What's our maximum, what can we expect out of this fire pump so we can understand how many lines, how many hoses we can hook up to it, and how much water we could actually move with this. Couple other good pieces of information that are on here. You've got model names, serial numbers um, of the individual equipment. Uh, Eventually, something's going to go wrong with our pumps, right? They don't last forever. Um, Something's going to go wrong where we're going to need to try to repair it, get some replacement parts. Knowing the actual manufacturer of the pump, the specific model, and even a serial number will help you to locate those parts if you need them down the road in the future. Um, the other thing we're looking at here at the very bottom of this image here, you can see the flow rate. This pump's capable of flowing 3,000 liters per minute when operating at 10 bars of pressure. And we'll talk a little bit more about the relationship of sort of pressure and flow as it relates to the pumps in a little bit here. But that's telling us our maximum capacity there, what we can expect to flow out of this thing is up to 3,000 liters per minute when we're pumping at 10 bars. So if we're just gives you an idea of what the capability of your pump might be. As the equipment operator, as the operator, the driver of your appliance, of your fire truck, um, another thing that goes along with making sure you know how that pump operates is, you're in charge of that whole vehicle. You should know where all the equipment is located on your fire engine, um, so that when other people are looking for that tool, you can direct them right to it. Typically, as the operator, you're not going to leave the vehicle. You're going to stay close to it. You're going to be standing right there at the pump panel. Um, you, for you to be sure that you know where everything is on the truck will just help our operations when we're out there on the fire ground, right? So if somebody needs something, you can direct them to it right away. I guess in the bigger picture, sure, everybody should know where all the equipment's located, but what we want to impress upon you is that if you're serving as the operator, sort of take that pride and ownership of that piece of equipment and be sure that you know it inside and out. So we talked about looking at that pump, figuring out how that pump works, right? We also want to make sure that we know where everything's at, where all of our tools are, that sort of stuff. Next thing you need to know the proper pump discharge pressure. So this is a big one that I really see folks struggle with um, everywhere in the world that I teach, not just in Africa, but back here at home in the U.S. too. Sometimes we see problems where we're not operating our pumps at the proper pressure. And in order to determine what that proper pressure is, you need to know for the branch or the nozzle, you need to know what the operating pressure of that is. You need to know what the flow of it is, and you need to know the size and length of the delivery hose that you're using. And when you know all of those factors, you can calculate what you should be running your pump discharge pressure. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on here in today's training. So we'll pause on that for right now. Have command of the fire pump. So again, we're talking about uh, as the operator, as the pump operator, right? You've got to be in charge, uh, and you're the one that's going to operate your pump, right? So, as the pump operator, you should be the person controlling the pump, controlling the pressure, opening and closing valves. that should only be done by the operator. So everybody else needs to keep their hands off the pump. Depending on how your individual fire brigade operates, maybe you're, as the operator, you're the only one that's going to connect the hose to the pump. That's fine, however you want to set that up. But it's important that you've got sort of command of that area, that you're in full control of the pump. You make sure that you know how many hoses you've got operating, the lengths of the hoses, what type of branch that you're using, how much water you've got left in your water tank. Um, you should be able to estimate how much time you've got left pumping based on your tank capacity and the flow rate of the branch that you're using. So really just take that ownership of what you're doing there. Make sure you're the guy, make sure nobody else is doing anything with the pump, and take command of that area. Really sort of exert yourself, have that command presence there, right? Training sort of the next piece, right? You've got to you've got to train, you've got to practice these skills, um, as you're trying to become sort of the best possible operator that you can be. So you need to be able to do these processes quickly. You've got to know that pump inside and out. Uh, and the only way that you're going to become proficient at running that pump, is if you're doing it on a regular basis. Another great way that you can help to build your skills as an operator is to train other people on how to use that pump as well. So it gives you the opportunity to talk through what you're doing. Be sure that you're presenting it, in the proper order, in a logical manner. Um, as you know your pump really well, and you really gain your skills as you can teach those to others, that helps you with that proficiency, helps you sort of evaluate yourself if you can present to someone else how to do it and they understand it and can repeat the process. So we really want to focus on that training. Something that I talked about uh, a little bit earlier when we were talking about testing the pump to make sure that it builds pressure and things like that. Talked about doing what I call that circular pumping, right? And that's something that you can do when you're training with the pump, practicing. Uh, I understand, some of you are facing that limited water supply problem. So it doesn't make sense for you to always be flowing water out of that pump and just sort of wasting that water as you're trying to practice running the pump, setting the appropriate pressures and things like that. So that's where you can do this circular pumping, where you're taking a hose from a discharge and pumping it back into the intake. So we're pumping in that circle where we're using water from the tank, bring the water from the tank into the pump, from the pump through the discharge manifold. It's going out through your delivery hose, and then it's coming back into either an intake in the pump, or uh, some of your some of your engines have a direct tank fill intake. You can pump directly back into that. It's a great way to work on practicing your skills without losing any water. Um, it can also be practical when you're out there working on a fire as well. Um, when we have our pumps engaged and that pump is running, you'll always want to be flowing water to help keep the pump cool. If you have the pump engaged and the pump is spinning, but you don't have the hose attached, or you're not flowing water, the temperature of that water within the impeller housing can increase and cause damage to the pump. So, continually flowing water helps to keep that pump cool. Um, so if you've got that tank fill valve, certainly you can open the tank fill valve and that'll recirculate the water through the pump and through the water tank for you. If you don't have that particular feature on your pump, there's where you can use this idea of connecting a delivery hose from the discharge to an intake and pumping that circle to help keep your pump cool while you've got another hose stretched out to the fire. Especially once we get to that salvage and overhaul stage of pumping, where we're not flowing water all the time. Um, it's a great way to help keep your pump cool. So ways to train, ways to use it on the fire scene as well. Last sort of topic before we get into looking at a pump, talking about the actual pump controls, take pride in your responsibilities. Um, you know, there's a lot of trust that's placed in whoever is that operator of our fire trucks. When you take on that job, not only are you expected to know how to run that pump and be quick and efficient at running that pump, right? But it's also your responsibility to get everyone to the incident and back safely. So your driving skills really come into play. That's a whole nother, half of a pump operations class is should probably be dedicated to talking about safe driving, right? Uh, we're not going to get too deep into that here for today's class, but that's your responsibility. We can't help someone else if we cause a problem on the way, right? If we're uh, if we're driving too fast to the incident and cause an accident, we're putting other people in harm. There's all of those reasons why we've got to be safe. Take pride in what we're doing. Um, be a skilled driver, be a skilled pump operator, understand where your equipment is on the fire truck so that you can uh, get it quickly deployed when you're on the scene. The other part of that, in taking that pride and ownership, is if you're that operator for that equipment, you should also want to make sure that it stays looking good, right? So after we return from a call, right, we should be washing the truck, keeping it clean, um, checking to make sure that everything functions on it. Um, you know, there's a lot of value just in washing that truck and making sure that it looks good so that the when the public sees it, you get a little bit more respect. It's easier to inspect a clean piece of equipment and look for problems or damage, just all sorts of good reasons. So really emphasize you taking pride in what you do as that operator, as that pump operator, taking care of that equipment that you've got. All right, we're going to start talking about some pump controls. Like I said in the beginning there, pumps come in all different sort of shapes and sizes, but generally speaking, all of our fire pumps are the same. They're all a centrifugal fire pump. So you've got an impeller housing, and you've got the impeller, which is in simple terms, you can think of it sort of like a fan blade. Inside, they're attached to a drive shaft, and so the water comes through an intake into the pump. Uh, that impeller, that fan blade, is spinning around and building up pressure and forcing the water out through the discharge manifold, excuse me, to our different discharges that we've got. Uh, some of the pumps that we'll see may be a two-stage pump. A two-stage pump just has two different levels, so it's running that water through sort of two different chambers, you could say, or two different impellers to increase that pressure for your high and your low pressure side. But essentially speaking, they're all the same. So, operating the pump. Um, like I said, well, the controls may differ from engine to engine. There's lots of different similarities. Um, Taking a look at this pump here, we'll take a closer look at this. Just at first glance, for me, Uh, I'm going to make some assumptions about this pump just from that image. Uh, a lot of the fire pumps that we see throughout Africa are PTO pumps. They're rear mounted. Um, it's a lot different than what we're used to here in the U.S. In the U.S., commonly we use what we call a midship mounted pump. So most of our pumps are sort of right behind the cab of the truck. There's a short drive shaft from the engine to the pump, and then the drive shaft splits and can be moved either to operate the pump or to operate the drive wheels. And then you've got a second drive shaft from the pump back to the rear wheels. Um, So that's sort of what we're used to. That's not common where you guys are at. What we're commonly seeing are these PTO pumps. So they're rear mounted in the back. They're operating off of the PTO or the power takeoff. A lot of different advantages to that. Many of our midship mounted pumps that we use, you can't pump and roll with a lot of PTO pumps. You can what we call pump and roll, where you can be driving and flowing water from the pump at the same time. That comes in really handy if you're getting into a rural area where you've got to deal with bushfire or something like that. So I'm going to make the assumption on this one pretty correctly. This is a power takeoff PTO rear mounted pump. The fact that I see that hose reel up on the top, um, based on my experience, that's going to tell me this is probably a two-stage pump, and we're going to have a low pressure discharges that we can hook our standard delivery hose to, and then the high pressure stage of the pump is going to go out to this high pressure hose reel uh, that we've got up there on top. So just taking a look at it and being familiar with some of the pumps, we can already make some assumptions about a pump we've never seen before. As we're running this pump, just something to think about. You want to use kind of all of your senses when you're operating the pump to figure out what's going on. So, of course, we're using our eyesight, right? Uh, we're looking at the gauges. We're looking at where our levers or valves are positioned, which hoses we've got, where they go in relation to the fire to give us an idea of what they might be doing. So all sorts of visual cues that we're going to use while we're operating a pump. We're going to use our ears too. We're going to listen. There's a lot of things that our ears can tell us as we're listening to the to the pump. We're listening for those engine RPMs to hear if the engine is accelerating or decelerating as we're adjusting things. If we've got an automatic pressure governor, it should be raising and lowering the RPMs on its own, depending on how much water we're flowing. What kind of noise is the pumps making? Um, there's a problem that we can run into when we're pumping it called cavitation. Cavitation, it happens when we get air inside that pump housing. That can happen for a variety of reasons. The main one being that you have an insufficient water supply. So that may be that you're trying to operate the pump and you're out of water from your tank, or you're having water fed into your pump, but it's not a sufficient volume. When the pump cavitates, makes a really distinctive sound. It sounds like there's rocks inside or gravel inside that impeller housing. You can hear it sort of clicking and clacking around, and that's these air bubbles that are bouncing around inside of there. I don't have a picture of it here. Somewhere here I have a small pump impeller that had been cavitated, and if you look at that impeller, the fan blade that's on the inside of that pump, when a pump cavitates, um, there's little chips that'll get taken out of that impeller housing. It's really easy to see if you look at that impeller. You can tell if a pump has cavitated. So if you're hearing that sound, if you're hearing that sound like there's rocks or gravel inside that pump, that's telling me I don't have enough water in there. We've got to shut things down. So uh, a lot of our pumps that we're using have automatic primers. You can hear those primers engage sometimes. If you have to manually engage the primer, um, that's what we're using to try to evacuate air from a suction hose or from the pump. Um, that can give you an indication of what's going on. If you've got an automatic priming system and you hear that engaging after you've been pumping for a while, it's a good indication that you're starting to lose water, that you don't have a sufficient water supply. So, um, different sounds that we can hear going on can tell us what's happening with the pump. And then feel as well. Um, a lot of times our the gauges won't be functioning. Some of our discharge gauges won't be functioning. Um, Even if they are, whenever I'm pumping, um, if those hose lines are running near me, I'm always stepping on that hose with my heel and pushing down on it to feel how stiff that hose is, um, because I've pumped enough to know when I step on that, I know what it feels like when I'm at the proper pressure. So when I step on that, if that hose feels softer than I'm used to, I know I've got to increase the pressure until I get it to feel what I'm used to. So we can use all of those different senses that we have to uh, to help us while we're running our pumps. We'll take a look at this particular pump again. This is similar to a lot of the pumps that we see. I'll show you some other images of some pumps that I've encountered. But we'll just go over sort of some of the different controls. This is a pretty simple one. What the controls are and what they do. So you might find some sort of a stop button on this one. Here it's on the far left side. It's the emergency stop. It shuts down the engine to prevent damage if there's some sort of an emergency. Again, it's called an emergency stop for a reason. It's not something that we use on a regular basis, only if something's sort of going seriously wrong. It may look like this. It may be a red button labeled stop. Couple different variations of what it is, but we do see those on a pump with the power takeoff operated pump. Right, we'll see sometimes an emergency stop button. Uh, this particular one, the first valve there is a monitor valve. If you've got a valve that's labeled monitor, that's usually talking about that whatever you call it up top, the deluge gun, the deck gun, uh, you know, whatever you call uh, that discharge that you've got up on the top that you're flowing high volumes of water with, right? So on this particular one, it's just a simple on-off to open and control that valve to open the discharge up on the top. So that's your monitor discharge. Um, the next one in line here, this is the fill valve. This is what lets the water come, from the pump into the tank. So this could be labeled a couple of different ways: tank to pump, um, pump valve, tank valve, uh, lots of different things. Um, this is or excuse me, not pump to tank. Yes, pump to tank, not tank to pump. So this fill valve, we're using this for a couple different reasons. We could use this to circulate the water to cool the pump. Um, if we're being if we're trying to fill our water tank and we connect to an intake that goes directly into our pump, this is the valve that we open. This is the line that flows water from the pump back into the water tank. Not every pump that I've seen has this, but that's what it does. Uh, Here we're also sort of indicating there you don't want to pump any more, that particular one, any more than 5 bar. Okay, so 5 bar is sort of our top end when we're pumping through that particular line. But that can be used, like, again, to fill the water tank or to cool the tank. And that's what I was talking about. If you don't have one of those where you can just connect a hose from a discharge to an intake to do that sort of circular pumping or pump cooling or whatever you need there. The next one is a drain valve. Um, this opens a drain on the pump. Um, as we're pumping, as we're working at a fire, typically there's no reason to use that drain valve. Um, Here in the U.S., uh, we use our pump drains a lot right now. Where here where I'm at, it's winter time. We just had some snow yesterday, so we'll drain the water out of our pumps. Um, to prevent them from freezing. If that's not a concern for you, that drain valve, we don't normally need to use this while we're operating it. It's good to always exercise those valves, so be sure you're opening that every so often, opening and closing that drain to make sure that it stays functioning. It's also good to open it and close it on a regular basis in case there's any sediment buildup or anything like that. But that's your drain to just sort of drain the water from the pump itself. On this particular one here, we've got a throttle control here. It's a little knob. Sometimes this can be an up and down arrow. Sometimes it can be a twist, a knob. That's our throttle. That's how we're increasing our engine RPMs. So as we increase the engine RPMs, this particular knob or this control is like pressing on the accelerator um, in the cab. So we're bringing up those engine RPMs, and when we do that, that's increasing our pump discharge pressure. At the same time, if we lower that, that's going to lower our engine RPMs. Lowering our engine RPMs will also lower our pump discharge pressure. Okay, so that's our throttle control. On this particular pump, the last one here is the PTO switch. This is what engages the power takeoff. Um, so uh, this is sort of that first procedure. If we're talking about how do we operate this pump, um, that's our general way of attacking the pump, right? Let me just uh, take one more look at what else is here, and then we'll talk about how we run these. We'll take a step back and talk about how we run these. But there's some warning lights on there. These may tell you different things. Um, if you see these warning lights lit up, that's telling you there's some sort of a problem. Um, so be sure that you're checking that out, trying to figure out what they're for. Check your gauges that these warning lights may be referring to. Be sure you're letting somebody know whenever you see these things light up. On this particular one, this is using this digital gauge here for our tank water level. You see a whole bunch of different configurations of a tank water level gauge, whether it's a sight glass in the back of the pump panel to a digital gauge like this. When we get to that 25%, when we get down where we've got a quarter of a tank of water or less, um, we've got to start letting people know that we're getting close to running out of water there so that they can take whatever precautions they may need to do. Certainly, if you're doing an interior fire attack where you have guys with the branch inside of a burning building, you hit that, you've only got 25%, you got a quarter tank of water left. They've got to be informed so they can start backing out before they run out of water. Um, the last thing on this particular panel, this gauge here is your tachometer. which shows you your engine speed or your engine RPMs. Um, if your pressure gauges, if your discharge pressure gauges don't work, but your tachometer works, sometimes you can use that to gauge whether you're operating at the right pressure or not. So those are our controls, right? So how do we actually run that pump? Step number one uh, is going to be to get water um, to the pump. This particular one does not have an electronically controlled uh, tank to pump valve. So we've got to find that. And let me see if we go backwards here. Do we have a picture of this? Uh, Here, okay. So this is the pump that we were looking at, right? Um, you can see uh, we can see this this is our intake right here. Let's see, maybe if you can see my little mouse arrow here. This is an intake here. So this is where if we were drafting or trying to pump from a static water supply, we would attach our suction hose here in this center intake. Uh, but as we're looking at this, I can see that this big piece of piping coming through here. This is coming from our water tank and coming down here to where this intake is. So this blue valve that you're seeing right here, this is going to be the tank to pump valve. That's going to let water go from the water tank into the pump. Right now, that valve is closed. I can tell it's closed because that handle is pointing out towards me, and that handle is perpendicular to the pipe. So that tells me that it's closed. I'm going to squeeze the lever on that and rotate that thing until that handle is in line with the pipe. That's going to open up that valve and let water from the tank into the pump. So that is step number one, is to open that tank to pump valve, whether it's a manual valve like we're seeing on this particular one, or sometimes it's an electronic control valve up here. First thing we're going to do is let water from the tank into the pump. Next step, we're going to engage the PTO. On this particular pump here, it's the switch on the far right hand side. With the engine running on the fire truck, you're going to flip that switch. That's going to engage the power takeoff, which is going to get the pump running. When we flip that switch, we're going to wait a couple of seconds. You're going to use your senses. You're going to hear the engine engage. You're going to hear the PTO engage. You're going to hear the pump start to spin. Give it a couple seconds. Let it start to spin. Okay, so now we've got the PTO engaged. We have the tank to pump valve open, so we're letting water into the pump. Now we've engaged it, so the pump impeller is spinning in there. The next thing we're going to do is increase our engine RPMs so that we get to our proper pump discharge pressure. And that's the second one in from the right. We're going to throttle up until we get to what pressure we're looking for. A good starting point for most of you, if you're using a combination nozzle or a nozzle that can go from a jet stream to a fog pattern, you're going to use 7 bars of pressure. Set it to that, and then all you need to do is find your discharge valve and open your discharge valve to charge your hose line. So, couple of different, pretty simple. That's our procedure for operating the pump. Just a couple of different pictures of some different pumps that you see here. We've got some intakes. Just looking at this pump, I can tell these are intakes down below here. We've got discharges up above, a couple valves there on the one on the left-hand side here. Um, just some different styles of valves to open and close, discharge gauges, and things like that. So you see a different variety of pumps here. Um, Here you've got a different control panel here with some intakes down below our impeller housing. back behind it there. If we zoom in on that pump panel so this one here we've got our tank water gauge level over here, our engine speed. This one's got a water and oil temperature. Over here, this is our under pressure. This will be our pump discharge pressure. Vacuum is our pump intake pressure. Here's that emergency stop button like that we were talking about on the other one. Um, there's the engine stop button if we need it. Engine start button if we need it. Um, Mainly operating our pump over here. We'll hit our PTO button to engage our PTO. Here's our tank to pump. Probably should hit that button to open the tank to pump first. Then press our PTO button to engage our pump. If we want to recirculate water, we can hit the pump to tank, and that's doing our circular pumping. Fire monitor is our discharge up on the top. This particular one's got two hose reels, right and left. There's the electronic controls for those. Those are going to be a higher pressure line. So pretty simple. Once we understand how these things operate, we can run just about any one. There's lots of different gauges that we've got on our pumps. Intake pressure shows us what's coming into the pump. That one on that last one was labeled as vacuum. If you're using your tank water or if you're drafting from a static water supply, your intake gauge will be at 0 or lower than that while you're pumping. Your main discharge gauge shows the pressure the pump's outputting. Um, some trucks have individual pressure gauges at each individual discharge. That's an advantage if you've got them for sure. What do the gauges tell you? Lots of different things, right? They're telling you what your pump discharge pressure is. It's also telling you what they're doing with that hose. Uh, when they open the branch and start flowing water, you'll see that that pressure will drop the slightest bit. When they close the branch, when they stop flowing water, you're going to see the pressure increase a little bit. If you see a significant drop in pressure that stays low and you haven't done anything else at the pump, that could tell you that you've got a broken line, right? That a hose is ruptured or something like that. Um, Other gauges that you've got there, can tell you how much water you have left in the tank. Can tell you conditions about the pump. Sometimes there's fuel gauges back there, so all sorts of different gauges that can tell you what's going on with the truck and what's going on with the line. Pump discharge pressure is something that we had talked about back in the beginning a little bit. I said I was going to get back to that. So let's come back to this pump discharge pressure a little bit. How do we know what to set our pump discharge pressure to? And the first thing, the main thing that's going to determine what our pump discharge pressure should be set at is our branch, is our nozzle, okay? Um, and if you take a look at the picture in the upper left here, you can see this particular branch flows 660 liters a minute at 7 bars of pressure, okay? So that's telling us flow when we're at a certain pressure. So that means we have to try to get 7 bars of pressure to this. If we look over here at this branch that I've got holding here, this one tells us if we take a closer look at it, gives us our operating pressure is 7 bars, and you see this ring here. We can twist this ring and select our flow. So this is in liters per minute. Uh, so here's the indicator notch, this little white sort of button. Here's the indicator notch. So right now in this bottom right-hand image, this branch is set to flow at 115 liters per minute. 115, you can set it to 230, like 350, and I think the top one is like 485. So that branch is a adjustable flow combination. Because it's combination, we know or we can assume it's going to be running at 7 bar if it's not labeled. Um, and then we can select how much water we want it to flow by twisting that ring on there. Okay, so the that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with our branch. If it's a combination like that, we want to flow that at 7 bars. If it's a if it's a smooth or a jet stream, whatever you call it at your individual fire brigade, if it's a smooth tip, sort of like this monitor that you see here, where it's smooth, there's no adjustments or anything like this, those we run, if it's a handheld jet stream, we run those at 3.5 bar. Okay. Uh, so that's our target pressure um, that we want to set it at. There are some other factors involved in that pumping to determine that, and the hose is going to determine if we need to increase that pressure. Okay. Um, the diameter of the hose controls the friction inside that hose, and friction loss takes away some of that pressure. So the longer, the more hose we have out, the more friction loss we're going to get. Uh, and so the more we're going to have to increase our pressure a little bit to overcome that. So friction loss is this is stealing energy from that flow, right? So what factors factor into that friction loss? The size of the hose, the diameter of it, the volume of water flowing through the hose, the length of the hose, and then sort of how rough the inside of that hose is. The big takeaway I want you take away from this is that you get more friction loss with higher flow and more friction loss with smaller diameter of hose. Um, a lot of your pumps that are operating, your discharge gauges are operating with bars. You're working in that units of bars. So typically, with some of the hose that you're using a lot of 60 millimeter hose. If you're flowing 60 millimeter hose, you only have one or two sections of delivery hose. Um, your friction loss isn't going to be that great at the flow rates that you're getting out of some of these nozzles. So you can aim for that target flow rate of 7, setting your pump discharge pressure at 7 bars. Um, so other factors that we would have to factor into that are elevation. If you are working at an elevation, uh, every 10 meters of elevation, you're going to add a bar of pressure. So if you're in a location where you've got sort of that high rise, or you've got some of those taller buildings, um, for every 10 meters that you go up, you need to add a bar of pressure. So if you're trying to flow water, 20 meters above you, the branch is 20 meters above where the pump is at, we need to add 2 bar of pressure to that. So if we're using that combination fog jet nozzle, we're going to add, we're going to be flowing at 9 bars of pressure because the branch wants 7, elevation's taking 2 away, so we need to pump at 9. If we're using just that smooth jet stream, that wants 3.5. If we're 20 meters above us, we have to add 2 to that. We should be pumping at 5.5. Okay. So that's sort of pump discharge pressure. The a lot when I'm teaching pumps in Africa, a lot of times I hear things like, "Well, we'll start at 2 or 3 bar and give them more pressure if they ask for it." That's dangerous. You're not getting the flows that you need out of your branch. Your branch isn't working the way it should if you're not pumping it at the pressure that you want. So you really have to look at that. If it's not labeled and it's a combination branch, 7 bars of pressure, jet only 3.5, you should be starting there at your pump discharge pressure. Starting there, not starting lower and seeing if they want more. We're getting up against our time here, so let me just summarize things uh, pretty quickly. Know the appliance, know the apparatus, know the fire truck. Know your way around it. know where everything's at, know how it works. Um, as you're driving, be sure you're doing that with a sense of duty. Make sure that you understand the responsibility to get you and your crew there safe and back safe. Understand those pump controls, understand what each one of those controls does, um, and how they operate. Study the pump, look at the diagrams, practice and train with it so that you understand them well. And then know roughly what pressure to pump your lines at. Remember, we're starting our minimum pressure, minimum engine discharge pressure is going to be the pressure called for on that branch. Uh, that's pretty much all I have here for today. Let me stop my screen sharing. Let me just thank you guys for joining us here today. We're going to transition into our tea time and wrap up the formal portion. But I've got plenty of time for questions. So if you've got a question, hold on to that for just a minute while I wrap things up. With a big thank you to all of you. I understand that you're using a lot of you are out here on your free time. You're using your own bundles to attend this class to make yourself better. Making yourself better makes your community better. I don't take that for granted. We at Africa Fire Mission don't take that for granted. So we appreciate you all being here. There are plenty of seats available in the classroom. If you know somebody that may benefit from these trainings, be sure to share that registration link with others. Um, we've got two more sessions yet this year because we're here in December. We've got two more sessions. We take the last 2 weeks of December off, and we'll start again in January doing this. I just want to remind you guys there will be a new registration link for 2026. This old one won't work once we get to 2026. So keep your eye out on our socials, on the Africa Fire Mission webpage. We'll be sure to get that link out to you guys so that you can be sure you're registered for next year's classes as well. So big thank you to everybody. I'm going to stop the recording and then we'll jump into some questions and answers and tea time.